This story has been shared by 2 million people. What happened when the fake bride went to the wrong wedding? Keep watching to see the ending. The white dress felt foreign against Maya's skin as she adjusted the veil one last time in the back of the hired limousine. Her hands trembled slightly as she smoothed the silk fabric, trying to calm her racing heart. The pearls on the bodice caught the afternoon light filtering through the tinted windows, creating tiny rainbows that danced across her lap. This wasn't supposed to be her wedding day. It was supposed to be her moment of revenge, her chance to finally get justice after months of heartbreak and betrayal. 3 months ago, her entire world had crumbled in the span of a single afternoon. She discovered that her ex-fiancé, Richard, had been cheating on her throughout their entire 2-year relationship. The discovery had come accidentally. A phone left unlocked on their kitchen counter, a message notification that changed everything. The text had been from Sarah, Richard's business associate, containing intimate details about their weekend getaway to the Hamptons. The same weekend, Richard had told Maya he was visiting his sick grandmother. But the betrayal ran deeper than just infidelity. Richard had also stolen her business ideas, the innovative marketing strategies she'd spent countless nights developing in their shared apartment. She'd shared them with him during their late-night conversations about their future together, trusting him with her most creative thoughts and ambitious plans. He'd listened with such apparent interest, asking thoughtful questions and offering encouraging words. She'd believed they were building something together, that her success would be their success. Instead, Richard had used every single one of her ideas to launch his own company, claiming credit for her creativity and vision. He'd even used her tagline, "Authentic connections in a digital world," without changing a single word. Maya had watched in horror as he presented her concepts to investors, speaking about market research she had conducted and demographic analysis she had compiled. The worst part was seeing him quoted in business magazines as an innovative young entrepreneur with fresh perspectives on digital marketing. Maya had loved Richard with everything she had. She'd envisioned their wedding day countless times, imagining herself walking down the aisle toward him with genuine joy and excitement. She'd trusted him with her heart, her dreams, and her ambitions. In return, he'd shattered her life and built his success on the foundation of her broken trust. Now he was marrying his wealthy girlfriend, Sarah, in what the society pages called the wedding of the year. The same Sarah he'd been seeing behind Maya's back for over a year. The same Sarah whose father happened to be a major investor in Richard's new company. Maya's plan was simple yet dramatic. Show up as a fake bride, create a scene that would expose Richard for the fraud he was in front of all his important guests and potential business partners. She'd hired actors from a local theater company to play her family, spending her savings on their services. The woman playing her mother was a seasoned actress named Dorothy, who had given Maya tips on projection and stage presence. The man playing her father was a retired Broadway performer who had coached her on timing and dramatic effect. She'd rented the most expensive wedding dress she could afford from an upscale boutique, choosing a gown that was even more elaborate than the one Sarah had featured in her engagement photos. The dress was a masterpiece of ivory silk and French lace, with tiny seed pearls sewn throughout the bodice and a train that stretched for 6 feet behind her. She'd even had fake wedding invitations printed with elaborate calligraphy and gold foil details, creating an entire fictional wedding ceremony scheduled for the same day and time as Richard's real one. Everything was perfect, meticulously planned down to the last detail. Maya had researched the venue, studied the guest list, and even practiced her confrontation speech in front of her bathroom mirror. She'd memorized every word, every gesture, every dramatic pause that would maximize the impact of her revelation. But as she stepped out of the limo at the grand estate where the wedding was being held, her confidence wavered for the first time in weeks. The Rosewood Manor was even more magnificent than the photos had suggested, with its sweeping Georgian architecture and perfectly manicured grounds. The gardens were absolutely breathtaking, filled with thousands of white roses and delicate fairy lights that twinkled like stars in the late afternoon sun. Ancient oak trees provided natural canopies over intimate seating areas, and a small lake in the distance reflected the golden light of the setting sun. Real guests in expensive designer attire chatted elegantly on the perfectly manicured lawn, their laughter and conversation creating a soundtrack of genuine joy and celebration. Women in flowing dresses and men in perfectly tailored suits moved gracefully between the cocktail tables, champagne glasses catching the light as they gestured animatedly in conversation. Children in their finest clothes chased each other between the rose bushes, their giggles adding a note of pure happiness to the atmosphere. For a moment, Maya felt a pang of doubt so strong it nearly knocked her backward. These people were here to celebrate love, to witness the beginning of what they believed was a beautiful union. They had taken time out of their lives, traveled from near and far, dressed in their finest clothes, and brought gifts and well wishes. Was she really going to destroy that for her own satisfaction? Was her need for revenge worth ruining what was clearly a joyful occasion for so many innocent people? "You can do this," she whispered to herself, lifting her chin with renewed determination. "He deserves this. They all deserve to know the truth about who they're celebrating." Maya made her entrance just as the real ceremony was about to begin. The string quartet had just finished playing Pachelbel's canon in D, and the officiant was clearing his throat to begin the proceedings. The guests had settled into their seats, programs in hand, faces turned expectantly toward the altar, where the groom waited with his groomsmen. Gasps echoed through the crowd as she walked down the aisle in her flowing white gown, her fake wedding party trailing behind her with perfectly rehearsed expressions of urgency and distress. Her hired mother was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, while her father looked stern and determined. The bridesmaids whispered among themselves, their faces masks of concern and confusion. "Stop!" Maya called out dramatically, her voice carrying across the silent garden with the projection techniques Dorothy had taught her. "This wedding cannot proceed." The reaction was immediate and electric. Heads turned in unison, conversations halted mid-sentence, and even the birds seemed to stop singing. The only sound was the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant splash of the fountain. The officiant's mouth fell open, his prepared words forgotten. The groomsmen looked at each other in confusion, while the bridesmaids' bouquets trembled in their hands. The groom's face went pale as he turned to see her, his confident smile melting into an expression of complete bewilderment. The bride looked confused and frightened, still holding her elaborate bouquet of white peonies and baby's breath with shaking hands. "Maya, what are you doing here?" The groom stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Maya's heart stopped. The voice was wrong. She looked more closely at the man standing at the altar, and her blood turned to ice. This wasn't Richard. This man was taller. His hair was lighter, and his eyes were blue instead of brown. The facial features were completely different, softer, kinder, nothing like the sharp angles of Richard's face. "I'm here to tell everyone the truth about you, Richard." Maya's voice carried across the silent garden, but even as she spoke, she realized her mistake. This man wasn't Richard. These people weren't Richard's guests. This wasn't Richard's wedding. But before she could stop herself or correct her error, someone gently touched her arm. The contact was warm and surprisingly comforting, cutting through her confusion and panic like a soft breeze on a hot day. "Excuse me," a warm, melodious voice said beside her. "I think there might be some confusion here." Maya turned to see a tall man with kind, brown eyes and a gentle smile that seemed to reach all the way to his soul. He was wearing a classic black tuxedo with a white rose boutonniere, his dark hair slightly tousled in a way that suggested he'd been running his hands through it nervously. His face was angular but gentle, with laugh lines around his eyes that spoke of someone who smiled often and genuinely. Everything about him radiated calm confidence and genuine concern, clearly the best man. "There's no confusion," Maya said firmly, though something about his presence made her feel oddly unsettled. Her prepared speech suddenly felt distant and irrelevant. "I'm here to expose." "I'm Jake," he interrupted softly, still smiling with that warm, understanding expression that made her feel like he could see straight through to her heart. "And I think you might be the bravest person I've ever met, but also possibly at the wrong wedding." Maya blinked, confused. The perfectly rehearsed words she'd practiced for weeks suddenly vanished from her mind. What do you mean wrong wedding? Jake gestured toward the crowd with a gentle sweep of his hand, his movement graceful and reassuring. Well, for starters, the groom's name is actually Michael, not Richard, and the bride is named Emma, not Sarah. Also, I'm pretty sure Richard's wedding is happening at the Riverside Country Club, not here at Rosewood Manor. Maya's heart sank like a stone as she looked more closely at the altar and the surrounding scene. Everything was wrong. The decorations were different, white roses instead of the red ones she'd seen in Sarah's wedding photos. The bridesmaids' dresses were lavender instead of the navy blue she'd expected. Even the music was different. This couple had chosen a jazz trio instead of the classical orchestra Richard had mentioned. "Oh no," she whispered, her cheeks burning with embarrassment as the reality of her mistake crashed over her like a tidal wave. I think I made a terrible mistake." The real bride, Emma, approached them with a mixture of concern and amusement dancing in her eyes. She was beautiful in the way that truly happy people are, with a radiant smile that seemed to light up everything around her. Her dress was simpler than Maya had expected, elegant in its simplicity, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that moved like water as she walked. Her dark hair was arranged in a loose chignon with small white flowers tucked throughout, and her eyes sparkled with intelligence and kindness. "Are you okay, dear?" Emma asked, her voice gentle and concerned. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm so sorry," Maya said, tears forming in her eyes as the magnitude of her error became clear. "I thought I was supposed to... This is so embarrassing. I've ruined your wedding day." "Oh, honey, you haven't ruined anything," Emma said warmly, reaching out to touch Maya's hand. "Though I have to admit, this is definitely the most interesting wedding entrance I've ever witnessed." Jake stepped closer, and Maya caught a hint of his cologne, something warm and woodsy with notes of cedar and vanilla that made her feel inexplicably safe. "Hey, it's okay. Mistakes happen. But I have to ask, what were you planning to expose about Richard?" Despite her mortification, Maya found herself drawn to Jake's genuine concern. There was something about his presence that made her feel grounded, even in this ridiculous situation. His eyes held no judgment, only kindness and curiosity. She could see laugh lines around his eyes and a small scar on his chin that made him look approachable and real. "He cheated on me," she admitted quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Throughout our entire relationship, for over a year, and he stole my business ideas, marketing strategies I'd worked on for months. I shared them with him because I loved him, because I thought we were building a future together. Instead, he used them to launch his own company and left me with nothing." Jake's expression softened with genuine sympathy, and Maya saw something flash in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, on her behalf. "I'm sorry that happened to you. What he did was terrible and completely unethical. You didn't deserve any of it. But I have to say I'm glad you ended up here instead." "Why?" Maya asked, genuinely curious despite her embarrassment. "Because," Jake said with a small smile that made her heart flutter unexpectedly, "if you had gone through with your original plan, you might have done something you'd regret forever. Revenge feels good in the moment, but it rarely brings the peace we're looking for. It usually just leaves us feeling empty and more hurt than before. And more importantly," he added with a slightly shy smile, "I never would have met you." Maya felt her heart skip a beat. "You don't even know me. I just crashed your friend's wedding in a wedding dress. I could be completely insane for all you know." "True," Jake chuckled, the sound warm and infectious. "But I know you're passionate about justice, you're incredibly brave, it takes real courage to do what you thought you were doing. And you look absolutely stunning in that dress. Plus, you've definitely made this wedding unforgettable. Emma's going to be telling this story for years." Emma, who had been listening to their conversation with growing delight, suddenly clapped her hands together. "You know what? Since you're already here in that beautiful dress, and since you've already made quite an impression, why don't you stay for the reception? We have plenty of food, an open bar, and I think everyone would love to hear the story of how you ended up here. Besides, it's not every day someone mistakes my wedding for someone else's revenge plot." "I couldn't possibly," Maya began, but Emma waved her objection away with a laugh. "Nonsense, you're staying. I insist. Michael, what do you think?" The groom, who had been watching the entire exchange with growing amusement, stepped forward with a warm smile. I think any woman brave enough to crash a wedding in a wedding dress deserves to stay for the party. Besides, you've given us the best wedding story of all time. Please, Jake said, offering her his arm with old-fashioned gallantry. Let me make it up to you for the fact that this wasn't actually Richard's wedding. I promise to be better company than he ever was, and I'd love to hear more about those business ideas he stole. I work in marketing myself, and I'm always interested in innovative strategies. Maya looked around at the faces of the wedding guests, expecting judgment and whispers, but finding only curiosity and warmth. The bride and groom were smiling at her encouragingly, and Jake was looking at her with an expression that made her stomach flutter with something she hadn't felt in months. Hope. Okay, she said finally, surprising herself with her decision. But I'm keeping the dress. I paid good money for it, and honestly, I look amazing in it. Deal, Jake laughed, the sound rich and genuine. Though I have to warn you, my dancing skills are questionable at best. I tend to step on toes and apologize profusely. As they walked toward the reception area together, Maya couldn't help but think that maybe this mistake was exactly where she was supposed to be. Sometimes the wrong turn leads you to exactly the right person, and sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. The reception was magical in a way that Maya had never experienced before. The venue had been transformed into a fairy tale setting, with the same twinkling lights now casting a warm glow over elegantly appointed tables. Each table was decorated with low arrangements of white roses and greenery, with gold accents that caught the light beautifully. The live jazz band played soft, romantic melodies that seemed to wrap around the guests like a warm embrace, and the dance floor was surrounded by old-fashioned lanterns that created an intimate atmosphere. Jake introduced her to everyone as Emma's honorary wedding crasher, and instead of judgment, she found acceptance and laughter. The other guests were delighted by her story, and she found herself the center of attention in the most wonderful way. "So you hired actors to play your family?" asked Michael's aunt, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "Yes," Maya admitted, gesturing to the group of people who were now mingling comfortably with the other guests. "They're actually quite good. The woman playing my mother is a theater actress named Dorothy, and she's been giving me tips on projection and stage presence. The man playing my father is a retired Broadway performer who coached me on timing and dramatic effect." "This is the best wedding story I've ever heard," declared the maid of honor, a bubbly redhead named Claire. "You should write a book about it. I'm serious. This would make an amazing romantic comedy." As the evening progressed, Maya found herself drawn deeper into conversation with Jake. He was intelligent and funny, with a dry sense of humor that perfectly complemented her own. He told her about his work as a marketing consultant, specializing in helping small businesses develop their brand identity and digital presence. His passion for helping entrepreneurs succeed was evident in every word he spoke, and Maya found herself sharing her own business dreams and ambitions with an ease that surprised her. "You know," he said as they sat at a table overlooking the garden, watching the other guests dance under the stars, "I'd love to hear more about those business ideas Richard stole. Maybe there's a way to help you get back on your feet, to start something new and better." "Why would you want to help me?" Maya asked, genuinely curious. "You barely know me." "Because," Jake said, reaching across the table to touch her hand gently, "I've been watching you all evening, and I can see the passion and intelligence in everything you say. The way you talk about marketing strategies and consumer psychology, it's clear you have a real gift for this. Richard was an idiot to steal from you instead of partnering with you, but his loss could be someone else's gain, both personally and professionally." Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the champagne she'd been drinking. "Are you flirting with me at someone else's wedding?" "Maybe," Jake grinned, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Is it working?" Before Maya could answer, the band struck up a slow song, "The Way You Look Tonight," and Jake stood up, extending his hand to her with a slightly nervous smile. "Dance with me?" Maya hesitated for just a moment, then placed her hand in his. His touch was warm and steady, and when he led her onto the dance floor, she felt as though she were floating. They moved together easily, as if they'd been dancing together for years rather than hours. Jake was a better dancer than he'd claimed, leading her with confidence and grace. "I have a confession," Jake said softly as they swayed to the music, his breath warm against her ear. "Oh no, what is it?" "I've been to a lot of weddings in my life. I'm the oldest of 5 kids, so I've been in more wedding parties than I can count. And I've never met anyone who made such a spectacular entrance. You've ruined all future weddings for me. They're going to be so boring in comparison." Maya laughed, the sound bright and genuine. "I'm sorry for ruining your wedding standards." "Don't be sorry," Jake said, pulling her slightly closer so she could feel the warmth of his body against hers. "I'm not." As the song ended, Maya realized that for the first time in months, she felt truly happy. The pain of Richard's betrayal was still there, but it no longer felt like an open wound. Instead, it felt like something she could heal from, something that had led her to this moment, to this man, to this unexpected joy. "Jake," she said softly, looking up into his kind eyes, "I think this might be the best mistake I've ever made." "Maya," he replied, his voice equally soft, "I think this might be the beginning of something amazing." "And Richard?" "Well, he could have his wedding to Sarah, wherever it was happening." Maya had just found something much better. A man who thought crashing weddings in a fake wedding dress was charming rather than crazy, who saw her passion as strength rather than weakness, and who looked at her like she was the most interesting person in the room. The evening was young, and Maya had a feeling this was just the beginning of an unexpected love story that would be far better than any revenge she could have planned. 3 months later, Maya would receive a wedding invitation in the mail. This time, she'd be invited as a guest to Richard's actual wedding. She'd RSVP no without a second thought, too busy planning her own engagement party with a certain best man who had stolen her heart the day she tried to ruin someone else's happily ever after. 6 months after that, Maya would walk down an aisle in a wedding dress again. But this time, it would be her own wedding, and Jake would be waiting for her at the altar with that same warm smile that had first made her heart skip a beat. And as she'd later tell people, sometimes the best love stories begin with the most spectacular mistakes. And the business ideas Richard had stolen? Maya would eventually start her own marketing consultancy with Jake as her business partner, building something far more successful than Richard ever managed. They'd specialize in helping small businesses find their authentic voice, a service they'd market with the tagline, "Real connections, real results." Because sometimes, Maya would reflect, the best revenge is living well and loving better.